So Saw started off in 2004 with a little movie that was more or less a psychological crime thriller, but definitely delved into the horror territory. But with its sequels, it then got renowned as one of the goriest, most horrific, torture porn-esque franchises of all time. And for that reason, I have decided it is time to count down my top 10 picks for the goriest kills in the entire series. And yes, these are all trap related. We are going from all of the movies, counting down my top 10 picks, with 5 honorable mentions for once, by the way, because there were just so many really gory traps that I had to incorporate 5 more as honorable mentions. But keep in mind that my top 10 list, my picks for the top 10, are in no particular order. I couldn't count them down from 10 through 1 because these traps are so gory, so bloody, so violent and horrific that I just couldn't rank them. I genuinely couldn't. So they're just my picks. There is no specific order to them. But either way, before I jump into my list, I want to say a massive thank you to my local cinema chain for the reason of they gave me this massive Spiral from the Book of Saw cardboard standout poster. I'm 6'1" and this thing is taller than me. This thing is fucking huge, but it's pretty fucking awesome. But either way, guys, with that said, I'm gonna give you now my honorable mentions. Starting off with the glass grinder from Spiral, the blender from Jigsaw, the fish hook trap from Saw 3D, the scalping seat from Saw 4, and the laser collar from Jigsaw. Even though it's incredibly CG heavy and looks like garbage, I still had to incorporate it into my list with at least my honorable mentions. But guys, it's now time to count down the top 10 in no particular order. First up at number 10, we have the Pendulum from Saw 5. This is a trap that has horrified me ever since I saw it for the first time. Watching Saw 5, the opening scene with Seth Baxter's test, which turned out later on to be a rigged trap from Mark Hoffman due to Seth Baxter being responsible for Mark Hoffman's sister's death and murder. In this trap, Seth Baxter has to use 2 vices to crush his hands before the device ultimately opens and frees him from his pending doom, but in the end, it is rigged, so therefore, even when he does crush his hands to dust, the pendulum swings down, cutting him in half with blood, guts, and organs flying all over the place. This is a brutal, incredibly gory trap that is actually incredibly amazing in regards to how they actually pulled it off in a practical sense. This trap was pulled off by the actor who plays Seth Baxter actually being on a slanted table, where his chest up was actually him, his real body, but below was a more or less prosthetic, a mannequin sort of mold, which they actually laid down while the rest of his body was at more or less a 45-degree slant on a table. Making this as practical as possible, they had crew members blowing through tubes to make it look like he was breathing and putting in more or less blood sort of packs so that when the pendulum actually swung and sliced it in half, blood would fly everywhere, intestines would fly everywhere. This is an incredibly gory, very graphic trap that I cannot incorporate the entirety of in this video for the reason that it would get immediately age restricted and demonetized. This is a brutal, gory trap that, you know, this entire video could very well be age restricted due to the fact that it's so fucking graphic, all of these traps, and trying to incorporate clips. I would not be surprised if this video gets demonetized. I would not be surprised if this video gets completely age restricted or even blocked. But either way, the Pendulum is one of the goriest traps in the entire series, and also one of my personal favorites. Although I have a vendetta against the whole rigged trap situation, I still love it for the reason of there's a reason behind it being rigged this time in regards to a personal vendetta with Hoffman. Again, in no particular order, but coming in at number 9 is actually going to be the knife chair from Saw 4. This is Cecil's test after he has been kidnapped by John Kramer. This is believed to be one of John Kramer's first official traps and tests, where Cecil has to match the ugliness of his heart and soul with his face, pushing his face through the blades on the cage that has now been put on his head to free himself from the trap. Ultimately, he also has some blades going through his wrist. The more he struggles, the more he moves, the more he bleeds, and if he doesn't do anything, he will bleed out. He has to make the sacrifice, and he ultimately does. But this trap is faulty, it fails, it falls apart, even though he's now bloody, gutty, all over the place with his face and his wrists, before he then goes to attack John, slipping, throwing himself into razor wires, probably giving John the idea for the razor wire trap in Saw 1. This trap, from just seeing him push his face very, very slowly through the cage, through these knives, cutting him so slowly, going back and forward and everything, it's a very messed up trap that is... I don't know how I can describe all these traps differently, for the reason of they're all the exact same in the sense of gore and description based, besides what actually happens in the trap. But this trap, honestly, probably fucked with a lot of people, especially those who have dealt with self-harm, like in regards to cutting, that is, just the general self-harming of cutting, but that's all the Saw traps if I'm being completely honest, majority of them. But this trap, it's gory, it's fucked up, and Cecil was willing to make the sacrifice, but ultimately he fails because not only does the trap itself fail and fall apart, but he doesn't forgive John and goes to attack him. At number 8, we have the rack with Timothy Young in a trap where it will twist both of his arms, both of his legs, and his neck to their full capacity, eventually killing him a very slow, painful, agonizing death that is incredibly graphic, incredibly visual, watching the bones completely shatter, snap, and break through incredible practical effects, by the way. This trap was actually pulled off with practical makeup, turning it one by one and everything until it was at the full capacity, and then they would just redo the shot and everything, putting more makeup and prosthetics onto the actor who plays Timothy Young's arms, and with the legs, they were actually prosthetic molds where the actor was kneeling above the shackles and they acted as his legs below. So they were actually prosthetic legs that they created to actually twist on these devices, and it's really, really well done. But too bad he dies because slow-ass motherfucking Jeff as Dead Meat, James A. Janice says, I'm not gonna fucking own it as my own. I'm gonna give James A. Janice from Dead Meat credit. By the way, great channel, guys. Love him dearly. But you know, Jeff is a slow-ass motherfucker, and he's a fucking bitch. So Timothy Young ultimately does die because Jeff takes too long to grab the key at the end of the shotgun. Also, by the way, double kill on his part, killing the judge he saved in the last test at the same time. What a dick. At number 7, we have the subway trap from Spiral from the Book of Saw. Detective Marv Boswick has lied so many times on the stand under oath that now he has to rip away the tongue of which he is used to lie so often under oath. In this trap, the reason why I put it on here is the graphic nature of it by the very close-up, very grotty shots of the teeth with blood in it, the fact that he has a big bar through his tongue, having to rip it away, the very slow shots and the very close-up shots of him trying to rip it away, the further bleeding, tearing it away from his mouth before ultimately he does not survive. But there's also the fact of when he does eventually rip it away by falling off the stool, you see it get ripped away and it is gross. You see the aftermath of the tongue still, you know, just swinging there even after the train has hit him in a glorious explosion of body parts. And it is beautiful to look at, but my god, is it gory. This trap is horrific in the sense of how simple, psychological, and graphic it is from the way the film is shot and directed brilliantly from Darren Lynn Bousman and edited as well. This is a very tense scene while also being very, very graphic. And I love it. This is great. I fucking love this trap. But it is one of the goriest in the series due to how it is filmed, directed, and the incredible prosthetic work, and also seeing the aftermath after he is hit by the train of the tongue still hanging there by the vice. At number 6, we have the angel trap from Saw 3, Detective Alison Kerry's trap, where she basically has to dip her hand inside of a glass jar with a key in it, but it has acid. She ends up basically making the sacrifice, trying to put her hand inside to grab the key. She gets it, she unlocks the device, but it's rigged. Amanda Young was a dick, so therefore her rib cage gets ripped out, unveiling all of her insides, the gory nature of her intestines, her stomach, her liver, and everything, ripping it out. I could not do this list without incorporating what is easily one of the most iconic and goriest traps in the entire series due to the horrific and very beautiful nature of this trap. Seeing just before it rips away her rib cage, that one shot of her basically embracing her death and her fate is kind of beautiful, but then seeing the aftermath, the flashes of the blood and the gut spurting out of her body and just falling out is just incredibly gross. But you got to give major props to the makeup department for this, because the practical effects and the VFX in the scene, the VFX and makeup department, I mean, is absolutely amazing. I couldn't do this list without incorporating what has been known as the trap that started the route of incredibly gory, fucked up traps within the series. Coming in at number 4 is going to be my personal favorite trap from the new Saw movie, which is Spiral, and that is the finger trap. Detective Fitch has to basically rip away his fingers due to him gunning down innocent people for no reason whatsoever, even if it is just them insulting him. Now he has to rip away the very tools and fingers he has used to kill so frequently. In this trap, he has to bite down on the device that is in his mouth to then activate the trap, spinning an axle in front of him, wrapping up wires of which his fingers are connected to, ripping them away from their sockets one by one. This is an incredibly brutal trap due to the screams, the incredible nature of Richard Zippieri's performance in this sequence, but need I mention as well the incredibly graphic practical effects on display here, from the very close-up shots of the fingers basically slowly being ripped away, and then as they start getting ripped away, with the skin tearing and the blood starting to spurt, to then seeing them completely tear away from their sockets, and just slowly being pulled across the table. The blood, the gore, even the beautiful look of the tub that he is in, starting to fill up with red, is just gorgeous to a certain extent, but also horrifying. The close-up shots, the way this scene is edited, just like the tongue trap, is incredibly horrific and gruesome. It's so simple, so psychological, yet so gnarly at the same time in regards to the gore. You see the sockets and how it's being pulled away, the leftover flesh and tendons, and it's just a very brutal trap that I can't imagine the pain that Detective Fitch experienced, but even the visuals speaking, I could not do this list without incorporating it, not just due to the gore on hand, but this is one of those few traps within the Saw series that genuinely affected me. One of my big things that makes me cringe and go ill is anything to do with like toes and fingers, like people stubbing their toes or kicking toes, or like, you know, cracking knuckles isn't that bad, but like jamming their fingers in anything, it makes me cringe. And the fact that there was an entire trap and spiral of which was so horrific and I wanted to look away but I couldn't because someone was having to tear away their own fingers, is something that I have to admire due to the psychological nature, but also the gruesome, gory nature of this trap as well, and it is beautiful. Next up, of course, I've got to incorporate the most iconic trap from the Saw series, especially due to its incorporation in the Saw 3D, and that is the reverse bear trap. This trap ended up appearing in Saw, Saw 6, and Saw 3D, a brief cameo in Jigsaw with Logan Nelson creating it, but at the same time, ultimately, Saw 6 and Saw 3D showed us the gruesome nature of this trap. You obviously had the reverse bear trap 2.0 that was on Mark Hoffman's head when Jill Tuck basically sentenced him to death, but he managed to cut open his own cheek to end up slipping out of the reverse bear trap itself after breaking his own hand as well. This was gruesome enough, let alone the fact of seeing Jill Tuck completely have her jaw ripped open at the end of Saw 3D, where you see, I presume, bones and cartilage and teeth just fly out of the camera as her jaw is ripped open, the blood pouring out of her mouth afterwards. I genuinely do not think I could show this on YouTube. I genuinely do not without receiving a age restriction. Next up at number 3, we have the horsepower trap from Saw 3D. Chester Bennington as Evan is basically a neo-Nazi. He's a racist, so he is glued to the seat of a car that will start up automatically, and he has 30 seconds to tear himself away from the seat of which he is glued. Otherwise, when the timer is done, the jack underneath the car will drop down, crushing his girlfriend, ripping away the arms and the jaw of his friend, of which is chained to the car, and then running over his mate. His mate that is strapped to the door, not really all that violent, not really all that gory. I kind of forget he even gets killed half of the time, but seeing the head get crushed and seeing that wheel completely decimate Evan's girlfriend in this trap after Evan does fail. Need I mention his friend having his jaw and his arms torn away, having such a focus on his death in that tearaway with pretty good practical effects, mind you. I do give them that besides the really crappy pink blood and gore once again. But there's also the fact of seeing Evan tear away his skin, unveiling the blood in his bare back is just gross. It's fucked up. And then, you know, seeing a neo-Nazi fly through the window of a car and then dying like that, breaking his neck, is also very satisfying. Need I mention, I love Chester Bennington, like Linkin Park, man. May he rest in peace. Next up at number 2, of course, from Saw 5, I've got to have the 10 Pints of Sacrifice trap. In this trap, Britt and Malik realized too late that all 5 of the recent contestants had to work together as a team. All 5 of them, but 3 are already dead. They have to stick their hands inside of a device which contains a rotating buzzsaw, and they have to cut up their arm, dealing self-inflicted wounds to bleed into a vial which has to be filled up with 10 pints of blood, and they need to work together to survive and unlock the door before the room is rigged to blow. And like the way this scene is edited and shot, the focus on the outside of the trap and seeing the blood spurt all over the device itself and even over their own arms, the close-up shots of the prosthetic arms going into these bud sores and seeing the blood go everywhere and just seeing the wounds be further inflicted further and further up the arms. I could not do this video once again without incorporating this trap, especially given when they actually succeed and the door unlocks, you see Malik put up his arm and you see the wound down his arm and how fucked it actually is and how much damage has actually been done, which, as we see in Saw 3D, is irreversible. He's in a sling for the rest of his life, and I think Britt is too, because they both supposedly survived, which I don't fucking know how. But this trap is gory, it's violent, it's beautiful in a sense that is so fucked up for me to say. I am not cutting it out, and I kind of love it. But at number one, this one I honestly do regard as probably the goriest trap in the entire series, and I have to say it. And it's the pound of flesh trap from Saw 6. The opening scene of Saw 6 has two contestants, one of which is a skinnier woman and one of them is a bigger man, where they have to sacrifice the most amount of flesh on the scale and cut it away from themselves, otherwise when the timer runs 0, they will have 2 screws drill into their skull, silencing them forever. Only one can survive and they have to sacrifice the most. This trap, it's just on both sides of the scale. No pun intended. It's just messed up and so graphic, seeing the guy who's obviously a lot bigger cutting away at his own stomach fat, tearing it away, slicing into himself and putting it on the scale, and then seeing the female, I don't remember these characters' names, and I really do apologize for that. I know a lot of people are really going to be mad at me for that, but I just can't be bothered looking it up right now. Sleep deprivation. That's the excuse I'm going to use. I know it's bullshit, but I'm going to use it. That's my excuse. Sleep deprivation. Again, I know it's a bullshit excuse, but still, fight me. I'm kidding. I love you all so much. But she ends up using a knife initially and starts sawing away at her own arm while initially thinking about doing her own fingers. Thank God she didn't, because we know how I felt about Fitch's trap and spiral. But then when the timer runs down and it's almost at 0, she gives into temptation and desperation with adrenaline, grabs a meat cleaver and just hacks away at her arm. The aftermath of seeing the arm left over, her carrying it to the scale and seeing the blood and everything all over the table and just seeing that determination on her face. This is quite easily, in my opinion, the goriest, most fucked up, gruesome, horrific trap in the entire series, and you know what? I still love it. I love to see it. I love watching this trap. It's kind of disturbing to say, but either way, guys, that is my top 10 list for the goriest traps in all of the Saw movies. All 9 of them. I tried to incorporate at least one from every single movie. If I forgot one movie and I forgot one trap, I apologize. But please comment down below if you think I missed a trap that definitely deserved to be on this list and what your top 10 goriest traps on the entire series are. Please comment down below. Let me know. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say. This video is going to get age restricted. I already fucking know it. I don't care. I want to bring you guys this video because you guys requested it and you guys really wanted to see it, and I'm here to give you guys content. So thank you all so much for the support recently. I really appreciate all of you, and I love you all so much. I hope you all enjoyed the video, but please comment down below. Let me know what the top 10 goriest traps in the Saw series are in your opinion, and what traps did I miss. Please comment down below. Let me know. Do be sure also follow the social medias like Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and Twitch to watch my live streams and keep up to date with your content coming to the channel. Do be sure also click the subscribe button and the bell to get notified when new videos are up every single week. Do be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget the subscribe button. I'll see you on the next video. Take care.